August 8, 1944. 28,000 feet above Bonn, Germany, the thin, icy air screamed past the twin engines of the RAF Mosquito PRX-15 as its silver fuselage sliced through the morning haze. Inside the cockpit, Flight Lieutenant Arthur Kendall steadied his gloved hands on the control column, listening to the faint hum of the Merlin engines vibrating through the frame. His navigator, Sergeant Colin Reeves, worked in silence, the soft scratching of pencil on chart paper lost beneath the steady drone. Below them, a quilt of German farmland blurred under streaks of smoke drifting from distant anti-aircraft batteries. The Mosquito's cameras clicked rhythmically, capturing factories, rail yards, and airstrips that Britain desperately needed to understand. The skies were unusually calm. Too calm. Kendall exhaled, fog briefly clouding the inside of his oxygen mask. "Quiet morning," he muttered. Reeves didn't answer at first. His eyes narrowed through the small blister window. "Yes, sir. Almost like they've packed up and gone home." They hadn't. A glint flashed above and behind them, sharp, cold, metallic. Kendall caught it at the edge of his vision and instinctively snapped his gaze toward it. But the patch of sky was empty, only sunlight on nothing. He blinked hard. Recon pilots had been joking about that ghost in the sky for months now. Some swore they'd seen a strange shape darting past their formations, too fast for a piston engine, too smooth in its climb. Others dismissed it as nerves or high-altitude illusions. Hitler's superjet. Schwalbe, they said. Nonsense, the aces laughed. Propaganda. A desperate bluff to raise German morale. Kendall shook off the thought. "Return course in 2 minutes. Keep an eye." He didn't finish. A streak, thin as a needle, bright as polished aluminum, cut across their starboard side. No noise, no warning. Just movement so fast Kendall didn't have time to flinch. "What the—" Reeves gasped. Kendall's gut tightened. "Hang on!" The Mosquito jolted as something with swept wings and a shark-like nose, dropped in front of them, climbing with impossible speed. Kendall shoved the control column forward and banked hard, trying to break formation with the Phantom. But the Phantom came back. Oberleutnant Alfred Schreiber rode his Me-262 like a predator, testing the edge of its claws. His Junkers Umo 004 engines shrieked at full thrust, the twin plumes forming a distorted shimmer behind him. He had spotted the Mosquito's contrail minutes earlier, an easy kill if he handled it clean. "Target in sight," Schreiber murmured in German, lips curling slightly. His jet closed the distance like a hawk diving through still air. To Kendall, it was impossible. To Schreiber, it was routine. The Me-262 swept beneath the Mosquito, then rolled up and over, coming down on its tail with surgical precision. At 540 miles per hour, he had only seconds to fire. But that was more than enough. "Jesus, he's coming back!" Reeves shouted. Kendall stabbed the rudder and rolled left, but the jet was already locked in. A burst of 30mm cannon fire tore through the Mosquito's right wing, splitting wood and fabric as if the aircraft were made of paper. Alarms wailed. A thin flame trailed behind the damaged wingtip. Reeves's voice trembled. "We've lost hydraulic pressure!" Another burst. The radio compartment shredded. Loose wires snapped like tendons. The oxygen system ruptured. Reeves collapsed sideways as the cabin filled with thin mist. Kendall fought the stick, but the Mosquito shuddered violently, its right wing sagging under the torn spar. Smoke coiled around the cockpit glass. A third burst slammed into the fuselage, and the Mosquito's heartbeat stopped. The aircraft dipped, rolled, and entered a fatal spiral toward the earth, cameras still clicking, recording the last seconds of its mission. Schreiber watched in silence as the spiraling wreck disappeared through a cloud layer. His hand hovered over the trigger, but there was no need. He'd already fired the shot that would echo through the war. The first Allied aircraft destroyed by a jet. He banked away, the Me-262's engines leaving a twin comet tail of shimmering heat. Far above, the sky seemed quiet again. Below, a new chapter in aviation warfare had just begun, one Britain had refused to believe until this very moment. August 10, 1944, RAF Fighter Command, Bentley Priory, England. The briefing room buzzed with low conversation as pilots filed in, boots thudding on the wooden floorboards. Maps of northern Germany lay pinned to the wall, and a film projector idled in the corner, clicking softly as the reel waited to roll. Squadron leader Terry Howard leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk on his lips. "Another phantom jet report, I hear," he muttered to the pilot beside him. "Recon lads seeing gremlins again." Most of the room agreed. The so-called Schwalbe had become an inside joke, a mythical bogeyman in the clouds. Then Group Captain John Drayton entered, his jaw set tight. The room fell silent. He laid a folder on the table. Kendall's Mosquito reconnaissance photos. The last frames, blurred but unmistakable, caught something slicing into view. Swept wings, no propeller. The hint of intakes under the nose. Drayton didn't speak at first. Instead, he switched off the lights and snapped the projector on. The screen flickered. A frozen image appeared, a mosquito in clean silhouette. Then a second image. Then a third. Then a shape. Sleek, predatory, wrong in all the ways piston engine aircraft were right. Gasps broke the silence. Someone whispered, "Good God!" Drayton stepped forward, voice steady. "Gentlemen, 2 days ago, Flight Lieutenant Kendall and Sergeant Reeves were lost. Their cameras transmitted frames before they went down. Intelligence confirms this is not a prototype. This aircraft is operational." He tapped the frame showing the shark-nosed blur. "This is the Messerschmitt Me-262. The smirks were gone. Howard leaned forward, brow furrowing. "Sir, what's its speed?" Drayton inhaled slowly. "Estimated over 500 miles per hour." The pilots looked at one another, confusion twisting into disbelief. "That's impossible. That's faster than anything we have. It's outrunning our best fighters by nearly 100 miles. Drayton's voice cut through the noise. "And it has already claimed its first kill." The room froze. The laughter of the past months suddenly felt foolish. The British had dismissed the reconnaissance photos as German propaganda. They'd joked about the Luftwaffe strapping rockets to broomsticks. But now the truth sat projected on a wall. A weapon no one had seen in combat before. A weapon built for speed, not rules. And it was already hunting. Drayton switched off the projector. The room sank into dim light. "Our fighters cannot engage it in open sky. Not at altitude, not in a chase." His gaze swept across the room. "We will adapt, but understand, the jet gives the Germans something they haven't had in a long time." He paused. Hope. The silence was thicker than the cigarette smoke curling through the air. August 20th, 1944. Luftwaffe base at Lechfeld, Germany. The hangar buzzed with mechanics swarming around Me-262s, their swept wings gleaming under arc lamps. Technicians in oil-stained overalls tightened bolts, checked fuel lines, and replaced scorched turbine blades.
Oberleutnant Alfred Schreiber sat on a crate beside his jet, helmet in his lap, watching the crew prep the aircraft for its next sortie. Engineers treated the Me-262 like a temperamental beast, unpredictable, fragile, and dangerous. But it was his beast. Major Walter Novotny, commander of the new Commando Novotny jet fighter unit, approached with a clipboard in hand. "Your report on the Mosquito engagement?" Novotny asked. Schreiber straightened. "Precise strike. Cannon performed well. Aircraft reacted cleanly at full thrust." Novotny cracked a smile. "And the enemy? Reaction?" Schreiber shook his head. "They never saw me coming." Novotny nodded. "Good. They need to fear the jet. Fear keeps them off our airfields." Schreiber said nothing. He knew the jet's strength, but also its weakness. The turbines ran hot. The engines stalled if throttled too quickly. Takeoff and landing required a long runway and nerves of steel. At low speeds, the Me-262 flew like a wounded bird. But at high speeds, nothing on Earth could touch it. Novotny lowered his voice. "Berlin wants results. Every Allied bomber you bring down buys the fatherland another day." Schreiber glanced across the hangar where other pilots prepared their suits. Young men with hollow eyes pretending the war wasn't already lost. He stood. "Very well, Herr Major. The jet will see what it can do." September 1st, 1944. 22,000 feet over northern Germany. A formation of RAF B-24 Liberators droned steadily toward a rail junction below. Their gunners scanned the sky nervously. They had seen the reports. They had heard the whispers. Then the lead bombardier spotted it first. A silver flash. No propeller, no engine hum. Just speed. Someone shouted into the intercom, "Jet! Jet! At 2 o'clock!" The jet tore through the formation, its 30mm cannon spitting fire. A Liberator's tail disintegrated in a bloom of shrapnel. Smoke poured from another's wing. Gunners fired wildly, but the jet vanished before their traces even reached the distance. A few seconds later, it reappeared, already banking for another pass. The RAF pilots could barely track it. The bomber crews had never felt so helpless. Their world moved in slow motion. The jet moved in another dimension entirely. Back in England, the intelligence officers would soon receive frantic, almost panicked radio transmissions. "It outruns everything. Climbing, climbing, straight up. We can't touch it!" The Me-262 was no longer a rumor. It was a monster, and the Allies had no idea how to slay it. September 5th, 1944. 19,000 feet above Münster, Germany. The morning sky burned orange along the horizon as a squadron of American P-47 Thunderbolts climbed in tight formation, their engines thundering like rolling artillery. Captain Don Razor Chambers kept his eyes sweeping across the upper altitudes. Every pilot in the group had been warned. If you see a silver flash, you're already in trouble. His wingman, Lieutenant Brooks, shot him a nervous glance. "You think we'll see one today?" Chambers didn't answer. He didn't have to. The tension in the air spoke for him.
Then it happened. A streak, thin, silver, almost delicate, cut across the sky with the indifference of a god swatting flies. Brooks cursed, "There! High at 11!" The pilots craned upward. The Me-262 arced overhead, sunlight shimmering off its sleek fuselage. Its intakes glowed a dull red from the heat of combustion. The markings on its side were unmistakable, the swallow of Jagdgeschwader 7. Chambers' heart hammered. He shoved his throttle forward. "Keep altitude! Don't dive for it!" But the instinct to chase was irresistible. Two Thunderbolts peeled off, banking into a steep dive after the jet. A fatal mistake. The German pilot, Lieutenant Franz Schall, rolled inverted, pulled the jet into a near-vertical climb, and vanished into the clouds. The Thunderbolts, straining their pistons to the brink, followed helplessly, engines screaming, propeller blades clawing at the thin air. They never came close. Seconds later, the ME-262 burst back through the cloud layer, diving directly at the main formation with terrifying precision. "Incoming!" Chambers yelled. The jet fired a short burst. A P-47 exploded into a fireball, spiraling down in pieces. Another took hits to the tail and rolled uncontrollably, smoke pouring from its fuselage. Chambers tried to turn tightly, but the Thunderbolt was heavy, its giant radial engine lagging behind his commands. The G-forces strained his shoulders as he attempted to keep the elusive shape in view. Then, a sudden quiet. The jet passed beneath him so fast that his brain barely registered the movement. Chambers snapped his head around, scanning desperately, sweat dripping into his eyes. Brooks's voice crackled over the radio. "Where is he? Where is he?" But the answer arrived in a flash of cannon fire. Brooks's Thunderbolt erupted into a bright flame. The canopy burst open, smoke boiling into the sky as the aircraft descended in a burning arc. Chambers gritted his teeth. "Damn it! Stay out of level flight! Keep weaving!" But weaving wasn't enough. The jet dictated every engagement, every approach, every kill. Chambers watched in helpless fury as the ME-262 pulled away, nose lifting gracefully, engines glowing, climbing to altitudes no piston engine fighter could hope to reach. And then, it was gone. Just gone. The sky around them was quiet once more, except for the low, desolate rumble of damaged Thunderbolts limping home. Meanwhile, on the ground in Germany, Major Walter Novotny walked the line of returning ME-262s, boots echoing on the concrete. This new aircraft, this miracle machine, was supposed to turn the war around. But even Novotny could see the flaws. Two jets sat off to the side, technicians arguing loudly in German. One engine hung open with its casing removed, turbine blades warped from heat stress. The other jet's landing gear had collapsed on touchdown, buckling under its own weight. Schreiber approached, sweat dripping down his face. Engine surged again during climb-out, nearly lost thrust. Novotny scowled. "Again?" The ME-262 was fast, yes. Deadly, yes. But also fragile. Any rapid throttle movement risked compressor stall. Any sudden maneuver risked engine flame-out. And worst of all, the jet was most vulnerable when taking off and landing. Every Allied pilot didn't know it yet, but this would eventually be the key. Novotny placed a hand on Schreiber's shoulder. "We must hold the skies long enough for production to catch up. The Führer demands results. The fatherland demands miracles." Schreiber didn't look convinced. He wiped his brow. "Miracles require time, Herr Major."
Novotny's expression darkened. "And time is the one thing we no longer have." September 12, 1944. RAF Debden, England. Across the channel, American P-51 Mustang pilots listened grimly as intelligence officers briefed them on the jet's latest attacks. A sergeant pinned a new photograph on the board, the wreckage of a B-17 bomber, its wings sheared cleanly, smoke still rising from the twisted metal. The room fell silent. Then, Colonel James Howell stepped forward. "Gentlemen, listen carefully." He pointed at the photo, then at a chalk diagram of the Mech 262's capabilities. "You won't catch it in a chase. You won't outclimb it. You won't outrun it." He paused. "But it does have weaknesses. The pilots leaned closer. Howell tapped the diagram again. It's slow on takeoff, slow on landing, vulnerable in turns, bleeds energy fast. The room stirred. Now, for the first time, the jet had limits, and limits could be exploited. Howell finished with a hard stare. So from now on, if you see a jet, don't chase it. He pointed to the airfields marked on the map. Make it chase you. A new strategy was forming, one that the Germans never expected. The jet that dominated the skies was about to face its first real challenge. September 20th, 1944. Above the Rhine Valley, Germany. The sky was a rough gray canvas, streaked with the heavy bombers pressing eastward. Dozens of B-17s and B-24s growled through the air like an airborne city. Around them, weaving and darting at the edges, flew the sleek escorts, P-51 Mustangs with shimmering canopies and slender predatory noses. Captain Frank Falcon Hilliard of the 357th Fighter Group banked his Mustang slightly, eyes locked on the horizon. His squadron flew a loose umbrella formation above the bombers, engines humming in steady rhythm. He had been briefed thoroughly. Don't climb after the jets. Don't dive after them. Don't turn fight them at speed. Bait them. Let them get greedy. It went against every instinct of a fighter pilot. Lieutenant Joe Ramirez, flying alongside him, exhaled sharply. "You really think this trick is going to work?" Hilliard kept his gaze steady. It has to. The bombers below looked tiny and fragile, a moving feast for any Me-262 waiting in the clouds. Then the warning came over the radio. "Bandits high, 11 o'clock, multiple jets coming in fast." The formation rippled as pilots tensed. On the horizon, 4 silver slashes dropped out of the sun, Me-262s diving steeply, engines glowing with the fury of raw thrust. Their airspeed climbed past 500 miles per hour as they tore through altitude like falling blades. Ramirez muttered, "Here they come." Hilliard's pulse quickened. "Hold formation, stay high, make them climb." The jets leveled out and opened fire. The shockwave of their 30-millimeter cannon blasts shuddered through the air. A B-24 at the edge of the formation burst into flames, dropping away like a dying star. The Mustangs did not dive after them. Instead, Hilliard pushed his throttle forward and began a controlled descent, fast enough to look tempting, slow enough to be a trap. 2 Me-262s streaked by beneath him, engines howling. Their pilots, drunk on speed and confidence, banked hard to pursue the apparently fleeing Mustangs. Ramirez grinned through clenched teeth. They took the bait.
The Me-262s, forced to slow into the turn, bled energy fast. Their swept wings weren't made for tight dogfights at low speed. Hilliard rolled into a descending loop, reversing direction sharply. His Mustangs snapped around with the agility only piston fighters possessed at low velocity. The jets, now sluggish and exposed, were directly in front of him. "Got you," Hilliard whispered. He lined up the lead jet. The Mustang's 6.5 cal Brownings roared, weaving lines of fire into the Me-262's tail. Despite its armor, the jet couldn't withstand sustained hits. The rounds punched into the engine nacelles, sparking a sudden burst of flame. The jet pitched forward as one turbine shredded itself into molten fragments. The German pilot bailed out, a black figure tumbling against the sky. Ramirez locked onto the second jet. "My turn." He opened fire, stitching rounds across the plane's fuselage. The Me-262 tried to climb, but stalled, bleeding too much airspeed. It snapped sideways and plunged in a smoking arc. Ramirez hoped. Another one. The Allied radio channels erupted with disbelief and exhilaration. The jets can be beaten. Hit them when they slow down, when they turn. Watch for the dive. For the first time, the sky belonged to the Mustangs again. Meanwhile, at Lechfeld Air Base, Major Nowotny paced angrily along the runway, his boots kicking up dust. Two pilots, young and shaken, stood before him, helmets tucked under their arms. "You chased them?" he demanded, face dark with fury. One pilot stammered, "Herr Major, they peeled off. We assumed they were withdrawing." "And you followed?" Nowotny's voice cut like steel. "The Me-262 is not a dogfighter. You let them trick you." He slammed a fist against the fuselage of a parked jet. "The Allies understand our weakness. If you let the jet slow, if you force it into turning combat, you are already dead." Schreiber approached, wiping grease from his hands after inspecting his aircraft. His tone was grim. "They've learned." Nowotny's jaw tightened. "Then we adapt. We attack only from altitude, only with speed, no chases, no turns." He looked toward the runway, where another squadron of Me-262s prepared for launch. But it may already be too late. October 7th, 1944, near Düsseldorf, Germany. Another bomber formation crossed Germany, this time with Mustangs flying higher, wider, smarter. The 262s dove in again. Their cannon fire shredded a B-17's wing. Another bomber limped away trailing smoke. But when the jets pulled up to climb, that's when the Mustangs pounced. Captain Hilliard and Ramirez swooped down like hawks. Their Brownings hammered the vulnerable jets mid-climb when their engines screamed at maximum strain. A jet exploded in a cloud of sparks. Another lost an engine and cartwheeled downward. The sky, once ruled by German jets, now echoed with Allied gunfire. Because the hunters had become the hunted. And soon, the most legendary showdown of all, the one that would define the Me-262's fate, was about to unfold. October 24th, 1944. Lechfeld Air Base, Germany. Dawn broke in streaks of dull silver as Oberleutnant Walter Nowotny strode onto the runway, his breath fogging in the cold Bavarian air. Mechanics scrambled around Me-262s, yanking starter carts into place, oil streaking their hands and faces. The turbines whined as they spooled up, an unearthly, metallic howl that vibrated through the concrete. Today was different. Intelligence reports warned of heavy Allied activity across western Germany. Dozens of bomber streams, hundreds of escorts. And somewhere up there, waiting, were the P-51s that had been tormenting the jets for weeks. Nowotny zipped his flight suit and pulled on his gloves with slow, deliberate movements. His men watched him with a mixture of awe and fear. He was a legend, Germany's youngest wing commander, already an ace many times over. But even legends felt pressure. Especially when the Reich pinned its last hopes on a few dozen experimental jets. Schreiber jogged up beside him. "Herr Major, the weather's shifting. Visibility will be difficult until past altitude." Nowotny gave a tired, thin smile. "Then we simply climb above it." He placed a hand on the Me-262's cool metal skin. Despite all its flaws, the jet still felt like the future. Sleek, unstoppable, inevitable. But today, the future would be tested. 12,000 feet above Lechfeld. Nowotny's Commando Nowotny formation climbed through a veil of clouds, their engines glowing red-hot from strain. The sky opened into a pale, calm expanse above the weather front. Then Schreiber's voice cut over the radio, tight, controlled. Multiple contrails, high altitude, moving fast. Novotny's eyes narrowed. All aircraft, Titan formation, prepare for intercept. The contrails descended with terrifying clarity, long white streaks resolving into silver shapes. P-51 Mustangs, dozens of them. Novotny exhaled slowly. So, they were waiting. 22,000 feet over the Bavarian countryside. Hilliard and Ramirez formed the spearhead of the Allied escort group. Their Mustangs prowled above the bomber stream like wolves watching a herd. Ramirez spotted shimmering specks rising through the cloud layer. "Frank! Jets!" The Mustangs held altitude. This time, no one panicked, no one turned, no one chased. Instead, they waited. Novotny led his Me-262s into a shallow dive, using gravity and thrust to build murderous speed. His cannons began thundering even before he closed in. A B-24's tail vaporized under a burst of 30mm shells. Another bomber rolled belly up, its wings sheared clean in half. Then Novotny banked forward to climb away. And that's when the Mustang struck. Hilliard pulled the Mustang into a screaming dive. "Now!" His gun spat fire. Brownings tore across the jet's left engine nacelle as Novotny tried to pull up. At high speed, the 262 was untouchable. But mid-climb, throttle strained, airspeed dropping, it was exposed. The left turbine erupted in sparks. Flames licked from the intake. Novotny's voice crackled over German radio, calm but strained. Engine hit, attempting to maintain altitude. Hilliard looped above for another pass. "He's trying to limp home." Ramirez's voice joined him. "Let's finish it." They dove again. Novotny tried evasive maneuvers, but his jet bled energy too quickly. The Me-262 wallowed drunkenly, refusing to respond with its usual razor precision. Hilliard lined up a shot, but before he fired, Novotny did something unexpected. He turned toward them.
Not away, toward. His remaining engine screamed at maximum thrust as he pointed the nose directly at the attacking Mustangs, unleashing a blistering burst of cannon fire. Tracer lines snapped past Hilliard's canopy. One struck Ramirez's wingtip, shearing a piece clean off. Ramirez swore, "He's fighting to the end!" Novotny's jet streaked between them, one engine dead, one overheating, smoke trailing behind like a torn black ribbon. Hilliard banked sharply. "Cut him off before he reaches the cloud layer." They dove behind him. Novotny's voice crackled through German radio once more. "I am losing altitude, trying to reach base. Tell them, hold the line." The jet dipped lower. Smoke thickened. Hilliard squeezed the trigger. A line of 5.0 cal fire stitched across the fuselage. The remaining engine exploded in a bloom of smoke and flame. Novotny's Me-262 rolled, dipped, and then fell into a steep, unrecoverable descent. On the ground at Ape Airfield, Germany, German ground crews heard the sound before they saw it, a distant howl, sputtering, then breaking apart. They looked up. A jet spiraled down, trailing black smoke. A parachute never opened. Major Walter Novotny, jet pioneer, ace, national hero, hit the earth in a fireball. Silence gripped the airfield. Schreiber landed 20 minutes later, tears streaking down his oil-stained face. He knelt in the grass and pressed a trembling hand to the still smoking crater. "He's fighting to the end. He's fighting to the end. Now we must take the fight to them. The sky is changing.
And indeed it had. The Me-262 was still deadly, still fast, still ahead of its time. But the Allies had learned its rhythm. Bait it, bleed it, hit it where it slowed, where it became mortal. By winter, Mustangs were prowling jet airfields, strafing runways at dawn, picking off Me-262s during their weakest moments, takeoff and landing. Schwalbe, the swallow, once feared as a superweapon, was now just another bird hunted in the open sky. The tide turned. The jet age had begun, but it would not save the Reich. And the pilots who once laughed at blurry reconnaissance photos now understood a brutal truth. The Me-262 had been real. It had been deadly. And the only thing more dangerous was underestimating it.